The restaurant security guard was fired for standing up for the waitress. He was shocked to find. Chris Parker found satisfaction in his job as a security guard at the restaurant. The job was very important to him, despite the fact that he had only been there for 2 months. His old job as a contractor for the Marine Corps taught him directly about the risks and sacrifices that come with serving his country. This new job, which made him happy, was very different from the one he had before. On the other hand, Chris was always strong, even when he was young and at school. He never failed to stand up for those who were weak, and to defend those who were unable to defend themselves. The strong desire for justice that had been building up in him since school became the most important thing in his life as he got older. Chris had a difficult time adjusting to life outside of the military at first, since it was so different from what he had experienced while serving in the military. But he eventually became accustomed to this new way of living. He knew that his new job would not be like his time in the Marine Corps, where every day was hard. At the restaurant, Chris had a lot of things to do. No one who's ever tried to be a restaurant security guard would say the job was easy. The guy who worked on Chris's job was fired because he was often missing and late. The former Marine never let those kinds of things happen to him. He was always polite, on time, and worked hard. Yet his hard work was not appreciated, and the attitude of the boss was the only thing that made Chris's life awful. Alfred Thompson, who ran the business, had developed a way of running things that involved precisely overseeing every part of the restaurant's operations. Because of this, he didn't really like who had strong, separate ideas and ways of doing things. When Chris, the young security guard, came on the scene, his tendency became clear. Even though Chris was very good at doing his job, he didn't agree with Alfred's management style from the start. What made the situation even more interesting was Chris's unwavering dedication to professionalism. He never said anything bad about the diner manager or treated her badly. This odd behavior suggested a deeper, more shady level of hostility that had apparently grown, a strange undercurrent that one person's anger towards another had taken root for no clear reason. However, Alfred's bad vibe was not just aimed at Chris. They were also felt by everyone else working at the restaurant. The young security guard was certainly upset about this, but he couldn't do anything to make things better. Alfred was also in charge, so he could do whatever he wanted. Everyone else thought Chris was a good kid and knew they could count on him and ask him for help when things got tough. Chris's story about his family took place against the sad backdrop of his father's death in a terrible car accident when he was only 5 years old. After the heartbreaking event, Chris's mother, Charlotte Parker, became his main caregiver and raised him mostly by herself. Charlotte was a devoted, one-man woman who didn't want to find another man who would take the place of her late husband. Instead, she chose to give her full attention to her son. There was a strong bond between mother and son that could be felt. Chris loved his mother very much and always supported her in everything she did. When Chris went to work, Charlotte couldn't help but worry. Knowing how eager and irritable her son could get at times, she struggled with fear that he might get into a hard situation by accident. Still, she felt better knowing that Chris had a strong sense of right and wrong. She knew that he would never hurt an innocent person and would fiercely fight for any unfairness. Within a month of starting his new job, Chris had already learned a lot about the people who worked at the restaurant. He knew more than just the faces of the people working there. He knew the names of every waiter and kitchen worker. This showed how friendly he was and how much he cared about the people around him. But one day, when Chris was walking into work, he saw a new face right away and paid attention. When Nancy, a new waitress, started working at the restaurant, it changed Chris's daily pattern and set the stage for events that no one saw coming. That young woman, who was probably in her mid-20s, was very pretty. She had long, flowing blonde hair and beautiful, big grey eyes that made Chris fall in love. She flirted between the tables with ease, like a delicate butterfly, and worked hard to serve each customer. She did everything with such poise and skill that Chris quickly became a big fan. Nancy's dedication went far beyond her job tasks. She didn't seem to be swayed by the usual appeal of tips, showing a commendable lack of interest in them. For her, not getting a tip wasn't a big deal, which was very different from the dark undercurrents that ran through the restaurant. Behind the scenes, Chris knew all about Alfred Thompson's dishonest actions. Some of the waitstaff tips were stolen in secret, which forced them to give the sneaky boss almost half their earned cash. The waitstaff was completely quiet, even though Thompson's acts were completely illegal. No one dared complain about the manager because they thought it was important to keep a good relationship with their boss. Each member of the staff thought about the unfair treatment they had been receiving and the cost of potentially losing their job. They chose to keep things stable in the restaurant. As usual, Chris kept a close eye on the business from his regular spot. The restaurant was usually a peaceful place where things didn't get messed up. However, the day in question was different from most days. The trouble started when a loud group of drunken teenagers walked in. Their brazen show of wealth could be seen from the expensive car parked in the lot. When Chris saw these customers, he tensed up right away. His experienced gut told him that such wealthy and rowdy customers often brought about chaos. The youngsters started being rude and picking on the waitstaff as soon as they walked in the restaurant. Unexpectedly, Nancy had to serve these three people. In spite of the fact that the young men appeared to be unfriendly, the waiters approached their table with a smile and placed the menus in front of them. She was the target of a sleazy stare from one of the males, who had laughed at her. Nancy tried everything in her power to make things better, despite the fact that she was aware that it would be difficult to provide service to these individuals without encountering any difficulties. Chris never took his focus off the table they were sitting at. The only ones who appeared to be unaware of the situation was the boss. The only thing that Alfred was concerned with was making money. He did not care about his employees at all. In light of the fact that the owner of the restaurant was unaware of his schemes, he was under the impression that everything in the business was operating without any issues. In the meantime, the young man kept saying mean and hurtful things. They argued with Nancy when she brought their order and refused to pay. The impolite young man refused to listen to Nancy, so one of them grabbed her by the hand and dragged her to the table. Chris just couldn't stand by and jumped right into action. The young people didn't think the guard was dangerous because he didn't look very strong. "Check this out. The defender comes." One of the guys laughed. He started to talk more, but Chris quickly knocked him down. He used a method that he had learned in the Marine Corps and got better at during hundreds of training sessions. Once they had lost one of their own, the remaining two intruders experienced a loss of confidence that they had initially possessed. Despite the fact that they suffered defeat, they regrouped and made an attempt to surround Chris. And even though they attempted once again, it was unsuccessful because the young guard was so competent that he knocked them both out in a short amount of time. While Chris was attempting to knock down the terrible thugs, he maintained his composure throughout the entire incident. Chris, with great agility, led them into the bustling street while firmly twisting the arm of one of the young men. Because he did not give up, he returned twice more and was successful in getting rid of the people who were causing trouble. A smile appeared on Chris's face as he added, "Well, that's a wrap." It was impossible for Nancy not to express her admiration for the speed and efficiency with which he had dealt with the situation. The words that she spoke to him were, "You were absolutely fantastic in there." Chris, who was always so humble, said, "Oh, come on, I didn't do anything special." And then he went back to work. As the rush of adrenaline began to wear off after what happened, the boss left his office, likely because of the noise. As Chris waited for the manager's response, the atmosphere became tenser. The noise in the business made him wonder what the manager would do. The expression on Alfred's face made it quite clear that he was dissatisfied with the way things happened, and the fact that the restaurant had to send away the clients who were obviously wealthy. Moreover, he was aware that he might run into problems if the young men in question were the children of powerful parents, as those parents would be unhappy with the manner in which their children were handled at the restaurant. However, the manager did not care in the least about Chris or the fact that the waitress was being abused. He was completely unconcerned about both of these matters. When the boss looked into the eyes of the former Marine, he became very angry right away. "How do you feel about what you're doing? Do you want to scare all of the customers away? After you did that, who will come to the restaurant? I'm not paying you to kick customers out onto the street," he yelled, clearly angry. However, Nancy stepped forward, trying to reason with the boss and bring attention to Chris's part in calming down what could have been a tense situation. As Nancy continued to defend herself, Alfred Thompson's anger grew even more intense with every new sentence she spoke. He did not want a Waitress to have any doubts about his authority in any way. He took the chance to show how powerful he was. It appears that the two of you have already met. What are you aware of? You are both fired. Therefore, you should leave this place. Do not even consider the idea of coming back to collect your final payment. I will use it to pay the restaurant for the damages you caused, Alfred said, pointing straight at the exit to make his point stick. It was clear to Chris that his boss was behaving wrongly, but Alfred had the power over him at that time. Taking a deep breath, he looked at Nancy and acknowledged in silence the sad truth of their situation. Chris, who was aware that the manager's decision was incorrect, made his way towards the exit on his own. When he got outdoors, Chris was taken aback to see Nancy following behind him. This was a moment that left a deep impression on him. "You should not have pursued me. Maybe he would have let you keep your job," Chris said with some sadness. Despite this, Nancy remained strong and repeatedly stated, "No way! That man and I are not going to work together again." Both of them became more resolved to face their uncertain future together as a result of the relationship they developed throughout challenging moments. In light of the fact that it was getting late, Chris offered to walk Nancy home. To pass the time, the man had to do something. His mother was going to ask him about his day at work. However, Chris began to feel uneasy before they were even a quarter mile from the restaurant. Chris had a sneaking suspicion that something was off about the situation. The man thought that someone was looking deeply into his back and digging into it. After Chris turned around, he noticed a car with its windows covered and moving slowly down the street. The man knew right away that it was spying because it was moving very slowly. "Nancy, I'm not sure what it is, but I think someone is following us. It might be those guys from the bar. We need to be careful no matter what," the young man said. Chris didn't expect Nancy to do what she did when she turned around and waved at the Fort's drivers. In response, the driver turned his headlights back on the Waitress. "Do you know this car?" Chris was surprised and asked. "Yes, I do," Nancy said, but it wasn't clear what she meant. "Who are you?" Honestly, Chris was not anticipating this at all. Suddenly, Nancy smiled in a weird manner and unexpectedly switched the conversation's focus to something else. When Chris understood that Nancy was not going to say anything else, he became tenser. It was frustrating for the young man to be in the dark about what was going on. Given that she was on the verge of getting in her vehicle, it would have been illogical to walk home with her. The young man threw his hat over his head, said goodbye, and then went home. Chris Parker's mother, Charlotte Parker, was there at the front door. Just as he anticipated, she would be waiting for him. Charlotte knew right away that something was wrong. "Are you having a hard time? Are things at work not going well? You have a dim expression on your face and you have arrived home early." Anxious, she asked. "What happened?" Chris replied. "Mom, I got fired, so I don't have a job to have problems at anymore." It was clear from the expression on his face that he was feeling a little uneasy about discussing work. Charlotte was shocked and pale as she took a few steps back as a reaction to the news. Charlotte had a lot of things going through her head, but she didn't tell Chris off. Rather than that, she asked him to join her in the kitchen for dinner out of a sense of compassion. Chris agreed, even though he wasn't hungry, despite his lack of appetite. He sat there and played with his salad. He went to his room to be alone after dinner and thanked his mother for the meal. Chris's mind kept going over the events that led to his unexpected layoff. As a result, he was unable to sleep for the entire night. It was difficult for him to bear the burden of what was believed to be unfair. At the moment that the first ray of sunshine made its way through the windows of Chris's bedroom, he was finally able to fall asleep. It was the end of a sleepless night that was caused by the result of his tireless commitment to justice. He didn't get to enjoy his sleep though, because a loud knock on his door soon woke him up. When the man opened the door to see who it was, he stopped in shock. It happened that Nancy came to meet him while she was wearing the same peculiar smile that he had seen on her face, made him even more confused. "Nancy, how did you find me?" A shout of surprise came from the man. "Could you let me in? I want to talk with you," she smiled and asked. Right away, Chris invited the visitor to come inside. He then got busy in the kitchen trying to make coffee. As Miss Parker watched her son struggle, she smiled and did nothing to assist him. Then, she returned to her room to give the young one some time to converse. While Chris handed Nancy a cup of coffee, Nancy managed to get directly to the point of her visit. "What do you think about becoming the manager of the restaurant?" she asked Chris. "Remember how they kicked me out of there the day before?" replied Chris. Nancy smiled and said, "Well, they kicked you out, and now they want you back," referring to the situation. "In general, you don't know too much. The restaurant is actually owned by my father. I put on a waitress outfit to do my job there after I graduated from college." On the other hand, Alfred, that jerk, was completely unaware of the major mistake he committed that day. That was the moment when Chris realized that Nancy was not, in fact, a poor waitress. Rather, she was the daughter of a millionaire. Following what was anticipated, the former Marine accepted Nancy's offer without hesitation and was prepared to begin working. After Alfred Thompson had been fired from his position, Chris was appointed to take his place. While he was in charge of the restaurant, it reached a new level of success, which had significant impact on the earnings it made. It was spectacular that Nancy and Chris's friendship swiftly developed into a romantic partnership, and it appeared as though the two friends would be together for the rest of their lives. In the course of Chris's adjustment to his new position, he introduced fresh concepts to the restaurant. In order to attract a diverse group of individuals, he organized themed nights and other special events. In addition to being a place to eat, the diner evolved into a vibrant, cultural hub for the neighborhood. Nancy took great pride in everything that Chris had accomplished and remained by his side. People talked about how well they worked together in business and in love. Friends and family were amazed by their connection, and they expected a prosperous and joyful future for themselves and their loved ones. Those who were close with the couple believed that there were countless occasions in their lives to be proud of.